Now call to order the Honeyburg Common Council. Start with the pledge of allegiance. Pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Right. Father God, thank you for the opportunity to be here today and for the dedication of all those that are serving today as citizens of this community, making the important decisions that need to be made. I ask that you be with us as we go through the meeting tonight, that you may guide our thoughts and that what we do here today benefits the citizens of Honeyburg. For these things we pray. Today's a little bit different. We call to order the Common Council. We have some business of minutes and approval of claims that have to happen. At that point, after that, we'll call to order the Board of Public Works and Safety. Representing the Board of Public Works and Safety tonight will be Terry Blessinger, Dan Fitch, and myself. And then we'll also bring forth the Utility Rate Advisory Board, which we made up of Sandra Bowman, Mr. Young here, Mr. Painter, and Mr. Blessinger again. So he'll be serving on both boards as we go through. We also have Dustin Schmidt, the Board of the Public Works and Safety. So we do have a quorum for for both of those. All right, do we first question is, do we have approval of the minutes? Does everybody have hands to look at those?
Make a motion to approve the minutes.
No, second it. We have first, second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Approval of claims. We have a motion to approve claims.
Make a motion to approve the claims.
I'll second.
Got a first and a second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries. We'll now call to order the Board of Public Works and Safety. It's going to be represented again by myself, Mr. Blessinger, Mr. Fitch, and Mr. Schmidt as part of the Board of Public Works and Safety. And now I'll call to order the Utility Rate Advisory Board. And the first thing we need to do with the board is elect a chairperson for the Utility Rate Advisory Board. Do we have a nominations? Okay, Sandra Bowman we have a first and a second for Sandra because Sandra's quiet tonight, so they're but we all those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. So thank you, Sandra, for serving gallantly
You're welcome.
as a board chair. We're going to start off, I think, for any decisions we have to make, there's two issues that we need to address first. One of those being kind of the history of this project. We have Eric Parsley here from Commonwealth Engineers that will have a slide presentation that he'll go through. The second version of that is we have Buzz Cron here from OW Cron and Associates, and he'll be really talking about the financial piece. We have given you copies of that of Buzz's information as well as anything, any financial information. I said you got a week ago or so prior to this when everything was finalized. But I think obviously what's here tonight, the project is much more expensive than what would have been thought of a year ago or maybe even 6 months ago. And that's where the explanations need to come in. And not only will they give a presentation, but they're free at any time. We do have all boards here that are free to ask questions of Eric. So we can start with Eric. Introduce yourself.
Thank you very
How
much.
you're involved and let us know.
Yep. I'm Eric Parsley with Commonwealth Engineers. I'm the project manager over this project. Been involved with the city for a number of years. This is our firm on the wastewater side of things. We'll kind of go through a little bit of that. I think as the mayor indicated, it's probably prudent at this point to talk a little bit about the why we have to do the project and some of the background there. And then I'll go through some of the cost trends that we've been seeing over the last few years on projects. As you know, we had a low number of bidders on this, kind of address that issue a little bit as well. Basically, I'll kind of keep this brief, but go ahead and shoot questions at me as we go if something pops up. But there's just a few big key areas as to why we need to do a project here. The plant itself, number one, is really just the age. The core facilities that actually process most of the wastewater, last upgrade on those was really almost 30 years ago now. Some of the units that are in service out there date back to 1957. So number one, we identified that we have an age issue. You know, usually wastewater treatment plants, we say 20 to 30 years before you start seeing some real major needs for improvements and replacements at the plant. Done a good job of maintaining what's out there, but it's simply it's a hard life at a wastewater treatment plant, and you just have equipment that just doesn't survive beyond that point. Second thing we noticed when we went through the data of the plant was really a capacity concern. We look back, this was data from 16 to 19. We originally did the study of the plant around that 2019 timeframe. We look at kind of a 30-day running average when we look at data. That's just a good number to see how the plant usually acclimates to flows as opposed to instantaneous peaks and whatnot. But when we look at that, we see the average flows in that 30-day rolling average is about 127% of the design. So the design of that plant was a little over 1 million gallons a day. We were seeing average months around 1.4 when we looked at that 30-day average. So that is a point of concern. And then kind of across the board, some of these other parameters you see measure the organic load, the suspended solids load, some of the other kind of pollutant loadings that we look at. We were also above on those averages as well. The bigger concern we have at this plant, though, is really with your peak flows. One of the things that, let's see, it's going backwards. Here we go. That graph kind of shows the things. The plant's a little bit unique in how it operates, especially within the regulations and guidelines of the state of Indiana. Huntingburg has what's considered a separate sanitary sewer system, which means it's only supposed to carry and collect sanitary waste. Well, we still see high flows whenever it does rain. That's not unusual, but the big differentiation is it's not a combined sewer system. In other words, it wasn't originally designed to carry stormwater and sanitary wastewater. It was designed with the intent of only carrying sanitary wastewater. That puts you into a whole different realm of regulations and the things that you can do when we start looking at IDEM regulations and things that apply to the plant. The plant was designed, if you kind of see the green stuff on the screen, normally flow goes through that pattern, and that's full treatment. The wastewater, it's screened, it's clarified, it's then biologically treated, then it's clarified again, disinfected, and discharged. And those processes together provide full treatment of the wastewater before it discharges. When it rains, that flow increases so much that it overflows that normal course of events out at the plant. And so these kind of orange looking rectangles on here are overflow lagoons, and they basically store that excess wastewater. The intent is that it gets repurposed back through the plant, fully treated and discharged. But unfortunately, we can't do that all the time. We just get flows that are in excess of what the capabilities are. And so the way the plant operates now is when these fill up, if we can't run it back through the plant, it's disinfected and mixed in with the fully treated wastewater and discharged. That's unique in the state of Indiana. That's generally not allowed. The city, I'm going to say we, was successful, I think it was 92, in obtaining an interlocutory agreement that basically allowed for this to happen. That was, I believe, in the shape of an agreed order that expired a few years ago, and allowed for this design to be done through the permitting branch of IDEM. I can tell you they don't like it. We've had pressures over the years to do away with that interlocutory agreement and to have full treatment out at the plant for every drop of flow that comes through there. It's a vulnerable position, I guess, is probably the best way to put it. And as years have gone by and different people have changed at IDEM over the years that weren't involved with that original decision. It's become more and more of an issue up there. And that really came to a head kind of in 2017 that led into the study that we did in 2019. Let's see if we can go forward. It's really gotten worse in the last, 3 months or so, I guess. And that I mentioned the permitting division that permitted this at the plant, but you've also got a compliance division at IDEM that reviews all of the reports that your wastewater treatment plant people send in and all the data that comes in. They really don't understand how this wet weather stream works out there. They're wanting Brad to go back and redo reports over the last 3 years that would basically state that anytime that is in service, that you are bypassing and you are overflowing untreated, non-completely treated wastewater. That will put you on a hit list, basically, with IDEM. Because you're essentially stating that every time that happens, we have bypass of full treatment. Certainly not something we want. It certainly impacts your ability to grow and accept additional flow at the plant. It can put you into the category of not being able to accept additional growth within the system, which is not something we want, obviously. So that's really the biggest driver, I think, is regulatory as to the need for doing something with the plant. So the new plant design is it's going to fit within the footprint of the area that we have within the flood wall protected berm that's out there at the plant. It is about a little over 3 times larger in capacity than what your current facility is. It will be able to handle the peak flows that have been recorded coming into the facility as well. So we won't have any more of this wet weather bypass of treatment whenever the new plant comes on board. The other thing I wanted to touch on is there have been changes since the 2019 study was done, and we've gone through the design process over the last few years that have impacted the design as well. One of the bigger issues that we ran into is some poor soils out on the site. Once we had the geotechnical reports back in, it was estimating anywhere from 4 to 5 inches of settlement if we were to build those tanks. Obviously, we can't have tanks settling 4 to 5 inches. They would be cracking and we would be leaking. So we've got a pretty profound subsurface support system that's going to have to be done as part of this process or this project, as well as additional reinforcement necessary in the tanks. The other thing that was determined was the historical loadings to the plant were significantly higher over the course of the last few years. There were some different sampling techniques that were started late 2019. What these graphs show here, this is just flow to the plant. This is 2016 going all the way to 2022. No real change over that time period. In fact, we went back further than 16 and really didn't see any changes. But these are those loadings I was talking about, the pollutants earlier. You can see where they were pretty low here. Well, then they jumped up after this point. And what happened is there was a difference in the mechanism in which sampling was conducted to get a better representation of what was coming into that plant over 24 hours. Before this time, they were taking basically grab samples every so often. And at this time, they started putting in meters that actually took composite samples more frequently throughout the day and got a better picture of exactly what was going on in the plant. The problem is this all came to light after we'd already done the first design of the plant and we're ready to go to IDEM. So we went back and essentially redesigned the plant, but we wanted to keep it within that same footprint. And we went from essentially 20-foot high walls to 30-foot high walls for the tankage out there. It increased the capacity. We had to increase the capacity of the plant to handle these loadings, not the flows, but these loadings by about 50%. So pretty sizable change there. And when you go from 20 foot to 30 foot, as you can imagine, the concrete gets substantially more. It's not just higher, it's a lot thicker as well. So going back into the bidding, as you know, we opened bids for the project about a few weeks ago and whatnot. There's an offsite component to this too. I'm kind of focusing more on the wastewater treatment plant components here. We are seeing just an overload of projects in Indiana. Really, it extends beyond that. But when we opened bids, there was one bidder that you guys had. These are 10 that we contacted through the course of the bidding that would normally be people that we would see involved in projects of this size that declined to turn in a bid on the job. And I mean, I can touch just on a couple of them. Bowen Construction, number one there. And know they've got a couple large projects in Owensboro and in Evansville right now that have them tied up. Dugan and Myers is a company out of Ohio that actually purchased plants, but they had a large treatment plant that they were also bidding in their backyard in Ohio and chose not to go forward. Kokosing, number 5, is involved with this $250 million water plant in Evansville. You've probably heard about that in the news. That had been 400 million and then they cut it back to 250, but they're tied up with things as well. And the others just across the board, we reached out and spoke to every one of these numerous times trying to entice them to bid. Just across the board, we're busy and had backlogs of work for the next 3 years, basically, is what we were finding. It's not uncommon, I guess, in this day and age. I kind of took a poll of our projects that Commonwealth has done over the course of the last 18 months or so. We've had at least a dozen projects where there were 2 or less bidders on those projects. 9 or 10 of those, there was 1 bid. It just is the environment we're dealing with now. We've had to rebid multiple projects because there were 0 bids at bid opening, and it's timing, it's workforce development, it's just an influx of projects that are out there, and that does obviously then impact our costs. So the other thing we kind of look at, and I thought this was beneficial for you all to see today as well. There's a couple different resources that we look at for construction cost information. This particular one looks at about 8 different large cities across the United States and provides some pretty good trending data that you can see. But what we're looking at here, basically starting in 2008, is a summary of the construction costs that they've seen on projects each year. And you can see a steady incline up to roughly, here's 2019 right here, which is really when we started this project. And then a dramatic jump from 2020, 2021 to 2022. Now, in the last few quarters of 23, we're starting to see that level off again, but we're not going to see it ever go down. Once they go up, that's where they're going to be. And there's a few things with the funding agencies actually coming out, becoming effective in June of this year, that we're anticipating another kind of jump up in municipal pricing as well. So I don't know if this is a misery loves company type situation, but we're seeing these same increases kind of across the board for everybody that's doing projects of this scale and of this type at this time. Kind of to that point, we also graph just internally within Commonwealth of projects that we're bidding. We graph the wastewater treatment plant projects, their cost versus the amount of flow. And that's what this graph is kind of showing us here. So basically capacity across the bottom on the x-axis, and then the unit cost per gallon on the y-axis on the side. You can see the dots here those are some of our projects that we have that make up the data on this graph. And this one with the green circle is Huntingburg. It is dead on with the line when we do that analysis of where it would be with today's dollars in this environment that it's at. Actually, I was a little bit surprised with some of the complexities that we ran into. I thought it might come in possibly a little bit above this graph, that it hits right where it does. It kind of shows us that this is just where the bid environment is right now, project. So that's really all I had to present. It's basically some background and some information as to where we're at with things. I know Buzz is going to talk about the finance side of things, but before I turn it over to him, do you guys have any questions, additional questions for me?
Yes. I've got several. You mentioned the last data was 2019. Do you have any current data for the average flow, what it is today?
Yes, yeah, actually, the
Is it up or
average.
down?
Yeah, it's the flow itself is actually staying about the same. So this data is the flow. The black line was 2019. And so this carries us on up to 2022, but we've looked at 23 data and the flow itself is has been consistent.
About the same.
Mhm.
Can you attribute any of that to water and people conserving low flow fixtures and things like that? Not getting enough fresh water in, which you really don't want to do,
Right.
but to get to parts per billion cubic feet per gallon.
Yeah.
I mean, is that,
We don't see a lot of trending of reduction in flows over time. And I think the benefits that we have with some of those types of devices and things that you see, can you get offset by the wet weather flows that kind of skew those up high?
and that wet weather, I mean, Steve Hummingbirds dealt with that for, since I was a little kid. I remember it, and we've gotten better. Have you taken into account, that might be a question for him, future issues? I know PFAS is big. I don't know if the city's tested for PFAS, and you know, that's probably 2 or 3 million if you find it, if not more.
Right.
And then getting rid of the filter. Have you tested, checked for that, or kind of planning ahead, because it kind of seems, you know, maybe fail to plan to fail.
Right.
And, you know, putting things in place as these regulations
Yeah.
come.
Yeah, PFAS is not something that's obviously incorporated into the design here. We don't know if there's going to be a PFAS issue or PFAS issue here. We do have phosphorus removal, which is a nutrient removal. The plant currently does that, and we are going to have to do that moving forward as well. The PFAS issue is a huge challenge and extremely expensive to address. So, you know, we've kind of got our eye on that in the future, but we're not seeing a lot of activity with that yet as far as implementing that, just because with it not being a requirement yet, nobody's wanting to absorb that cost. So. Mhm.
What percentage of the update is related to new regulations rather than maybe beautification, concrete road rather than
Yeah,
regular paved road and that? I
yeah,
mean, what percentage?
We're-
might be?
we are, it's a very bare bones plant. You know, one of the things that we looked at, you know, constantly through this was, are there some things that we could cut or trim to kind of reduce the costs of the project? Really, all the core things that we need are built into it right now. Now, I will say we've already started discussions with the contractor to look to see if there's any value engineering work that we can do to try to bring some of the kind of control some of the costs during construction and whatnot. But those items usually will end up in just helping your contingency budget allowance during construction to kind of address any potential change orders that you may have.
So do you have an idea of what percentage this is related to regulations, or were you not in regulation, or?
I would probably argue most of it's regulatory driven. Most of it's regulatory. We do have some, there is obviously some growth built in here based on historic, you know, growth patterns and whatnot that we've seen, and some allowance for, you know, economic development administration is one of your funding partners in here. And that was for growth and to maintain your current economic status with some of your industry and whatnot. So don't have a good percentage breakdown for you, but
If we look at division, we did say, and I will say from Division B standpoint and some of the street construction, because there will be some street construction on First Street. We are working together with all of our utilities and street departments. We've had those discussions to keep those costs down, to be able to bring that street back so that we don't have to redo it 2 years from now,
Twice.
3 years from now, we have a finished street. smooth street at the end, but what's the best way to go about that?
Mhm.
And the most inexpensive way is still gonna get the same quality. That's really what value engineering is to have a good surface, from a street standpoint, but at the lowest cost possible. We're looking at we've looked at future, do we need to replace laterals along the way? What else underneath there, what that is open, can we replace down to save us money down the road? A lot of discussion.
Yeah.
Across the board, and we continually talk about value engineering, how we get the same product for lower, and that's what I like about Commonwealth. They think that way. They've been very considerate of the city in the process that I've been involved in. I've asked some of the same questions.
Have we, has the city of Huntingburg had any fines or any downstream issues with the water that's going out that have complaints?
Have not. Brad could probably speak to that a little bit more as well, but yeah, we have done a good job of not violating any of the permit limits or anything of that nature.
So any chance of funding through the IRA? Biggest entitlement program ever, money,
Right.
got to be able to get some of it.
Yeah. I guess from the funding standpoint, and the Buzz can speak to this a little bit more probably than I mean, you've got three funding agencies involved here. We've got a large amount of grant coming from really all of them to help with the project. So
Yeah, the biggest from my standpoint as mayor and fiscally looking at it, the longer we wait to apply for those funds, normally the price of construction is surpassing the amount of funds you could receive at the end of it. We have $8.3 million right now in grant funding. We're not under contract by like June 19th.
yes,
We'll lose that. So we'll have to get that back, as well as we could be losing a 1.1%, 1.125, I believe it is percent on the rural development loan that we could slip out of our grasp pretty soon if the longer we go. And nobody can get that kind of money today. That was secured 3 years ago. Was that almost 4? Over 3, I believe. And we're getting at a time limit on some of those that, hate to say the word cheap in this project, but cheap money, so to speak, from an interest rate standpoint. We have been very fortunate over and above most communities for the grants and funding, and I think Buzz can speak a little more to that. The risk that we have along with that.
What was expected and from the city and the interlocutory agreement with IDEN?
so
Actually, it goes back a long time. We had to, beginning in 1992, we had agreed to budget, I think it's like $100,000 a year to address inflow and infiltration. And as you know, an interlocutory means temporary. That temporary order went on for almost 20 years. And at one point, I just said, that's enough. You're going to have to do something. And that's when the 2002 project, with the huge basin you saw, that's when IDEN said, well, maybe we'll accept that temporarily. So we constructed that huge basin that would capture the inflow, the excess rain event inflow, and hold it for later treatment. But we're not even able to treat that. So it's being discharged after being sanitized chemically, but not fully treated. And that's just not going to last long with IDEN regulatory order. They're going to put us on a sewer connection ban at some point. They've been patient with us, and in fact, we've been lucky since 1992. But we need to step it up and do what's expected of every community. And we're not the only community in this boat. There are plenty of communities around us that are going to have to address these same issues. We've just come to the point where we've realized we've got to face it.
I have yet to speak to a community that's not going to have to address the next few years. In this area.
So the 100,000 a year or a month, so for 10 years or whatever it was, has that already been used or is that still there to put forward?
I don't, we're probably doing 50,000 a year now,
Yeah, correct. 50 to 75.
but there was a set amount that we had to commit to every year. I'm not sure it was 100,000, maybe it was only 50,000.
Is that mostly to take care of infiltration?
Yeah.
Really?
Space.
Let me ask you, I got a-
laterals.
On it, there's a paper in this packet, total gallons treated and sold. Just by glancing at it real quick, going over it, is it safe to say that we are treating 60% of our treatment is from infiltration?
That's probably across the board.
Yeah, I can speak to that too. So it's a shame, almost, I mentioned the separate sanitary sewer communities versus combined sewer communities. It's really almost harder for the separate sanitary sewer communities than the combined sewer communities, because the goal for separate sanitary sewer communities is zero overflows. We're going to treat every drop that comes through. The combined sewer communities, they have some different provisions that allow them to actually overflow after certain rain events. You simply don't qualify for that. So, I mean, we have done a lot of inflow and infiltration work, I&I reduction type projects. Not just in Huntingburg and not just the work that your department's done over the last 20 years, but even in other communities, we've gone as far as replacing 90% of the pipes under the ground, only to find that you don't drop that number down of significance. We've had some small communities that have incurred a lot of millions of dollars in debt. That's very, very difficult for them, only to find that we're barely inching that number down. We say if you get a 15% reduction, you've done a good job. And 15% doesn't do anything for us, here. So, we advise communities not to ignore the I&I efforts. You certainly need to continue to do those, but view those from a maintenance perspective more than from a perspective that we're going to get that number down, which ends up being, we just have to come up with a way to transport and treat it at plants. So, and that's not unique to Huntingburg. We're seeing that in a lot of other communities as well.
Like I said, 60% is a high number, so what else? If we would get rid of that, what else is
Yeah, and that's the number.
causing the issue? I know in the old days that when they first brought out the plastic pipes and just buck them together, because there's a lot of houses in the 70s. Those pipes were just bucked together and not sealed, and those are leaking.
Yeah, and you guys are really doing a good job of televising your lines, cleaning your lines, addressing where you would have those, or you would have pipes that are separated that you see active leaks in, lining those or replacing those lines. You've got probably one of the best policies as far as the laterals that go from the main that the city controls to the homes, and that you have to have those inspected and have to have those properly repaired. That's where we see an area that gets neglected with a lot of communities. You get a lot of pushback from your residents on it, but we see a lot of flow coming in from those as well. So, the fact that you've instituted those things, and over the last few years, and we're still seeing those numbers, it just kind of furthers to that. There's really not a lot, there's not a lot we can look at to try to gain and knock that 60% number down.
Those laterals are a requirement in any real estate transaction that occurs in the city. So transfer of ownership, that has to occur on the laterals. We do have a good inspection program, and they do what we can through that. We look at areas where we may be paving, or we'll be working on some on 8th Street next, and some other areas up in the north side where there's a lot of I&I. But it would be staggering to be able to come up with a number that would take to reduce that by 20 or 30%. Would it be more than this?
Yes, yeah. And you would still not have a plant capable of handling.
That's probably the I&I. Water goes where it wants to, so sometimes
Yes.
you can control it as best you can and do your maintenance.
So what's our potential growth with this new plant?
Well, let me go back, see if I've got that number.
But
Yeah, so we're going from current plant's 1.1 and we're going up to 3.5 MGD. We've got allocated what seems on paper is a relatively small, I guess you'd say, number for residential growth. We've got a pretty sizable amount for industrial commercial growth at 60%. But you got to kind of bear in mind the way we come up with the average flow for design purposes is we look at the peak month, and when I was talking about those 30-day rolling averages, so we build into capacity there as well in that number. So I think it's safe to say it's that 3 times the current capacity is really probably a better gauge of how much growth we've got built in.
Saying 3 times the current capacity or 3 times the current inflow, the max flow or peak flow. whatever you wanna call it.
Right. Really, I look that more at the capacity because new growth, right, new extended sewers and whatnot they're not going to have zero inflow and infiltration, but they're not going to be your big hitters on your peak flows on your IN. So.
Can you speak to the change in testing that brought this about? Tests changed radically about 2 years ago.
Yeah, 2019. Yeah, about midway through 19.
Because before that, all of this was significantly different before. Who
Yeah.
changed the
I
testing?
came in for inspection and we did graph samples and they made us install a composite sampling. And so to that date, you can see the data changed where we did a composite versus
Yeah.
a graph.
Yeah, and so I mean it was.
You would put the composite in 5 years earlier, the data would be very similar.
Mhm. Yeah.
And we did double sample. We
Mhm.
bought a portable. Went out and tested areas and tested it a couple times coming into the plant and all the data matched.
We looked at, we even took the time to kind of look around at some of our different sewer sheds within the collection system to see if maybe we were getting more pollutants coming from a certain area. Starting then, was the difference in data because the data actually changed, or was the difference in data because we were doing a more accurate sampling procedure? And it wasn't a testing procedure. It was how the samples are taken, basically. So, and it's kind of a testament. I mean, you can see that's what's interesting about this to me is our flows are all consistent, I mean, pre and post, because the flow metering is different from what the sampling is. So yeah, in hindsight, it's really a good thing this was discovered, because it would have been, it kind of took us back to look at some things in the operations of the plant to say, hey, are we seeing some excessive, solids building up and more frequent need to, land apply and some of that stuff. And it kind of answered why we're having the challenges that you were once we saw that data come through.
Is a composite sample an average over time as compared to rail?
24-hour period. So before this time, they were going down there with a jar and grabbing a sample at one point at 8 o'clock in the morning. That was your sample for the day. And now we're doing a 24 composite. So it runs every hour and pulls a sample into a jar and then you select that every minute.
That when it peaks, is that when the raining might occurs? Right, yeah.
A lot of times you don't see your BOD as much move like that. Definitely on this one, which is showing as flow. But there's a little bit of correlation. Like if you see this peak here, this is flow coming in. So that's what January. And then you see January here, we're actually a little bit lower on BOD. So we do see a little seasonal change, and that's organic load, if you will.
What's the green line? I can't read that.
Oh, the green line is the proposed design loading. So this is what the new design loading is of the plant. So that it'll have, and it doesn't have to be above, because these numbers do average out as opposed to like an instantaneous peak.
there a load level that has to be met for IDM or EPA?
They look at, as far as load goes, they kind of look, whenever we do the design, we have to provide all these calculations to them and all this data. And there's certain criteria that they look at with those loads that we have to design the plant to. So it's looked at through that. And then your permit does have limitations on your discharge of what it is. And they also want to see a certain removal percentage from the beginning of the process to the end of the process. So.
And you said that was bucked up 300%. Was that what that figure said?
Mhm.
Three times,
Yeah,
but based on
the new data.
past history,
Yeah.
current data, how long will that get us through until we're back again?
Oh, you,
Based
like I
on
said, that all gets
potential growth
taken, yeah, that all gets
city.
taken into account with that potential growth of the city as well, because we don't just flatline that pound per day loading, that's also projected forward with the higher flows,
So will that get us through 5 years, 10 years?
20-year planning period.
So that'll get us
Yeah.
through 20
Yeah,
years.
and I think we've got some contingency built in with that too, so.
If this plant could handle the capacity of people, we wouldn't have to upgrade the plant, would we? Or is this something because we need to do something different to treat it? Wise, if we had, for example, if our town was a little smaller, and we're still operating like we are, we wouldn't have to upgrade the town. What if we had bigger lagoons, so to speak? I used to just, you know.
Right.
If we made a lagoon 3 times as big as what it is to hold the excess,
Yeah,
you know what I mean? I mean, with it.
it would not, it would not, if you kind of drew a line in the sand, so we're not gonna grow anymore, we're not gonna do anymore. What else could we do? You really, it wouldn't be cost effective to build a lagoon system or something like that, storage large enough to be able to handle this kind of flow and then trickle it back through the plant. It's just, for lack of a better word, way too undersized to be able to handle what we see those volume peaks.
Essentially, is it flowing faster than we could treat it? Is that what you're saying?
During peak times, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
No matter what we did, it would still flow
Yeah.
at that rate.
Mhm. And then the problem comes in, is if you were a combined sewer community, we would have certain restrictions on how long you could hold that before you have to run it back through in the plant. But the whole time you're holding it, you're basically treating it. I mean, you have to do some type of aeration and it's not just stagnant, no cost, just a hole in the ground. There's additional treatment that has to occur. And what ends up happening is seeing this more frequently with the weather patterns is we don't get that dry pattern after those rain events to be able to slow things down through the plant and run this back through.
Yeah, it rains 2 days later.
Right, yeah,
Okay,
and we're already full, so.
So, well, we're always thinking of growth. It seems like, new subdivisions and there's industry in town. There might be industry come later, but what would the far reaching impact of a sewer connection ban be to a town like Huntingburg?
So when you technically reach 90% of your capacity, and they're looking at flow, they're not as much looking at some of the loadings that we worry about from treatment. When you reach that 90% point, at that point, then IDEM says you have to have a plan approved by us for what you're going to do to increase your capacity of your plant, or we're not going to allow you to issue any new taps on your system. So it would completely stagnate in growth within the city. So.
Can you go back to that, the one that showed like the increase of 300%? Yeah, that one.
Okay.
So what were those numbers from, or what date did these numbers come from as far as like the peak existing months?
Yeah, so the peak flows, those we've checked those. They originated back in 2019. I think we did update those 2 years ago when we sent a modified PER into rural development. We rechecked those again, and they still follow the trending. I can tell you, like the residential growth, there is a prescribed formula that we have to follow in these reports that we put together, that looks back at the historical residential growth and
So-
bases it on that.
Like on the residential growth, if I'm reading it correctly, that's basically 67,000
Gallons a day. Mhm.
So we have a Hunter's Crossing subdivision, which
Right.
has how many houses in it?
I think it peaks at 143
143, so at the
or 100.
rate of like 130 and 143, it seems like we've eaten into a good deal of that 67,000 already of those numbers.
143 homes, and IDEM requires you to use 310 gallons per day per home. In actuality, you're going to see somewhere around 150 to 200 gallons per day per home. So if we said 200, that's 28.6. So it's pretty good. But what I'm getting at, what I was going to say too, is if you look at your existing peak month, that's your highest 30-day period. And when IDEM looks at the capacity for the sewer band specifically, it's over a year. So if you look at your annual flows were somewhere around 1.3 or 1.4 million gallons a day, averaged over 365 days. So that's why I was saying there's growth built into this number that you don't see specifically allocated here. Yeah.
I just don't want it to be where we,
Right, yeah, yeah.
So you said a plant needs, if it's 90% capacity, you need to do something to the margin, right? And where are we at?
We are at 127%.
And how do we get permits to add these?
It goes back to that interlocutory agreement and that understanding of this bypass or this wet weather treatment system that you have. As I said, it's pretty unique within the state of Indiana that you've been able to do this as long as you have.
So, I mean, how do you get away with it? That's
And
not-
the difficulty's been, we convinced
I think our attorney can have a better word.
yeah. We've convinced it, and when I say this, there's that vulnerability, it's because the permitting folks have understood the process that we're doing, but then the compliance folks at IDEM are looking at this differently than what they did. And they're saying, wait a minute, we don't want you recording this as, it almost seems like you're doing full treatment, but you're not. We want this now to be considered an overflow, essentially, a bypassing treatment. And that would be a very bad thing.
I was thinking they should have forced us at one point to say, here it is, that's
Done a
what-
good
that's
job doing
what-
it this long, so.
My memory serves me well. I think we had the first agreement with IDEM in the state
Yeah.
for this.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think we ran that course.
I think there may have been maybe another one since, but I think the number's 2 with the state.
Not very many in the state.
If you look at those numbers, it's about 35% over what normally they would require us
Yeah.
Pretty much.
to be allowed.
so does this plan like allow for increases in the future or some sort of, if we would need to have more demand? Does
Yes.
this allow for the design has an easy,
Yes, yeah, there's actually a couple different ways you can approach that. So, we've got a 3-cell system, if you will. You could obviously add another cell that would increase the capacity. There's also some modifications you can make to the operation of each individual cell that can gain capacity as well without a lot of capital outlay with that. So there's actually some newer treatment technologies that IDEM is considering allowing in the state that would allow us to gain some capacity within the tank sizes that we have currently in the project. So
Not sure of the terminology, but I read recently, like maybe within the last 6 months, about some new requirement that subdivisions or small communities outside of our city limits would somehow have to have their, instead of septic systems, they would have to somehow connect to a bigger municipal system. Am I thinking correctly on that? And
maybe
how would that-
regionalization,
What was that?
regionalization.
Yeah, maybe, but you know, I think there's talk about that, and
Yeah,
I don't know if communities or subdivisions outside of town at some point would be required to connect to
yeah.
the city system. I mean, have you heard?
Yes, yeah, there's a couple different pushes on that front. There's obviously unsewered communities that they're now discovering do not have adequate land space available within the acreage of each home to have what's called an on-site treatment system. So that means if you don't have space to redo it or do it properly, what are your options? So we have a big push with unsewered communities needing to connect. It's more feasible for them to connect to an existing plant. IDEM, and there's regulations coming in place about that's where regionalization comes in. They don't want to see a lot of small treatment plants scattered around because they've noticed over the years those don't get maintained well, and you end up having permit violations and whatnot because you've got a scattering of these smaller plants that can't be maintained and aren't properly maintained. They'd rather see more centralized treatment in a community that can adequately handle it and get that flow to that facility. It allows for more regular maintenance, more consistent maintenance. We've got a shortage in operators across the state. So it helps with that front. So there's actually funding, or the funding agencies really look favorably on projects that involve regionalization, getting some of those unsewered or even maybe currently sewered, but have inadequate facilities and they're too small to really maintain them.
So do you guys see Huntingburg's location and geographically other subdivisions or smaller communities around us that may someday be forced to connect into our system, and are we
Yes.
thinking that way as
Yeah.
far as growth?
Yeah, definitely. I think it kind of gets into the county's plan to some extent. But I can speak to from IDEM's perspective, they would much prefer to see you guys be kind of the hub for treatment in any surrounding either new development or existing areas that maybe are served, maybe are not served, to come to Huntingburg for treatment.
Just to be clear, there have been some communities that have had those discussions outside of, but nothing in Huntingburg has, none of those
Right.
discussions have occurred or we've been approached by any means. There are other communities around us that's probably gonna happen.
Hasn't the population of Boyce County already reached a point where you cannot have a septic system? We have to connect.
I'm not real, I don't think it has to do with the population. It usually has to do with the amount of land that you have on your specific.
You know, years
lot.
back in the 90s, its population, we were right at that where they were gonna ban
Mhm.
septic systems.
This is 5 acres now.
I don't know.
A lot of communities cannot afford to go the route that we are, and that's where lots of it's coming from.
Yeah.
And, that we can't either, but, we're at a point where the options are not there. Every option's been investigated.
Are we gonna completely shut down our current facility once we get a new facility?
So I'll go back to this. There's some of the tankage that gets reused. This is probably about the best. Yeah, so the new facility's going in this green space here. Majority of it, you've got some control buildings and things. We've got a couple, these tanks will be taken out, and we've got another tank that's being located here. We're going to reuse this tank. We're going to continue to utilize the drying beds, but if you recall, we've also got on the docket a centrifuge dewatering process project that will come up later through the course of design. But for the most part, everything you see here and here, or these two lagoons will no longer be used. Now, we're going to keep this lagoon. We're gonna impact it a little bit by construction coming up through here. That's the newer one. It's got the newest liner and whatnot. We're gonna go ahead and keep that just in case we still would need some wet weather flow. Don't have to do away with it for construction purposes. So we've got a little bit of buffer built in there as well. But for the most part, this is the heart of the beast here. And it'll completely be done away with. So.
Part of your value engineering is not removing those things that we didn't absolutely.
Right, absolutely.
There could be some structures that may not be used to the capacity that they are now, to the extent they are,
Mhm.
but will be in place just
But well,
because we don't have to.
we're gonna keep them then? I mean, so can we use them again down the road in case we
This-
expand again?
yeah.
Any of it? I mean,
This absolutely.
Besides,
This stuff,
yeah,
or a lot of the components, there's a lot of mechanical components and things in those that it's not worth keeping. Trying to keep up in the event that you would ever use it in the future. So it gets back to that age issue that we've got. But this is very few mechanical components, things to.
well, I kept thinking like, okay, so if we build it and we expand down the road by bringing in another community.
Mhm,
Like,
mhm.
I hate to bring the rate up for everybody just to cover that.
Right.
One thing, why can't we use?
Right. Yeah, that those components are really at a point where you wouldn't be able to keep them maintained and functional if they were going to come online. And then just the process flow itself to try to I guess work those in with the new system really wouldn't add any benefit. With the new system that you're going to have, like I said, you're going to be cost ahead to actually do some things to increase capacity through it, rather than try to maintain and utilize those old facilities. We've got not the sidebar, but we've got a clarifier tank that we reused in a rehabilitation project, and a clarifier tank is what one of these are as well. It had sat unused for about 20 years, and with the intent that, hey, if we ever needed it in the future, they would have it. The tank was there. It was difficult to install when they did it. And so we completely redid the guts of it, the inside of the tank, put it online, operated it for 30 days. The floor of the tank broke because as it had sat over time, and then once they started, there was piping under the floor, started recirculating flow through that piping. Well, the piping had separated, it sat for 30 years and not been used, and it undermined the soils that were underneath the tank floor. And then once we put it back in service, it broke. So it's one of those good intention, but now we're spending another $1 million to fix that tank.
Any other questions up there before we bring Buzz up?
So the intention of this is that it's gonna get us through the next 20 years.
The planning period is 20. I think it will last 40. If it doesn't last 20, it's probably a good thing, because that means you've had that much growth and you're getting that much more use out of the plant. So
But I mean, the capacity
Yeah.
will get us through.
Yeah.
It's fine.
okay, thank you. Just roll it.
Thank you, Eric. Excellent job and great questions, I tell you. For the record, I'm Buzz Crone with O.W. Cronin Associates out of, well, we're out of Westfield, but we're in Noblesville, Indiana now. So they tore my building down for a road project so, in Westfield. But anyway, just, echoing Glenn's comment, it sure would have been nice we could have done this 3 years ago before all this hyperinflation and so on. But there is good news, because we do have almost $8.2 million in grants that we're going to receive in buying down this project. We already had a significant commitment of about, let's see, over 21 million in bond funding from USDA rural development at 1.125% for 40 years. And our second tranche will be about 19,445,000. Also 40-year term, but that will be at 2.125%. Both are excellent, you can't get money, and I'll quote the mayor on that. Inexpensive money. No, the other thing that I think is a positive out of this is that in those two bond numbers, we're looking at 40,700,000 instead of 40,966,000 that was in the books that you all received last week. It's not enough of a reduction to change the rate plan, but it was a positive result in rebidding Division B that saved about $266,000 off of what the estimate was in going into that. And we're also part of that 40,700,000 is going to be used to refinance all of our existing debt at these low rates. So the plan is we have almost $2.8 million of three different bond issues that will be, well, two bond issues and a loan that we've owed the electric utility over $1 million for several years. That's going to get wrapped in at this 1.125% interest rate. And then we're going to use funds on hand to retire the 2015 bonds. That's about $440,000. We'll pay the accrued interest up till the date we take those out, but it has to occur before or during the closing. And I think we're talking about maybe doing that 2015 bond a few days before the closing with Rural Development is the ultimate lender, but we're also dealing with interim funding through the Indiana Bond Bank. And they've had a pretty good program, we don't get quite as good a rate from them, but during the course of the construction period, they will invest those funds and we'll just build a net interest cost. I think their rate's going to be about 3.65%, but as we draw the funds down, they're going to be investing those funds and probably earning positive arbitrage during the construction period. So our net interest expense, we've got $2 million factored into our pro formas, but hopefully it's going to be significantly less than that. We do have to pay the interest during the construction. That was part of the deal we had with Rural Development, but since we're not going to have to pay those other bonds, we'll have plenty to pay that interest during construction out of our current, cash flow with these rates. Let me see what other things that came up here. Yeah, again, we're creating, we're over tripling the capacity at the treatment plant. Go ahead and here's our final project cost summary. Again, we come down to the 40,700,000, but the base construction costs, including a pretty healthy contingency allowance, are about 46.1 million. Then we've got about 2.8 million of refinancing existing debt factored in, and then minus out the 8.2 million of grants, so we end up at the 40,700,000.
So do we have that in our packet somewhere? That sheet?
There is the one that's in the packet totals 40,966. The reduction
Rates on page 3 of the rates page 3, but now the bottom line says 40,966.
right. It's actually going to come in a couple 100,000 less at 40,700,000. I'll see that you get an update on that, but I think those bids just came in a week or so ago. Is that right? So it wasn't a big enough change to kill a lot more trees, but it is, it is a positive.
Everybody's read a copy, it's 300 pages, so.
Yeah.
So, do it electronic.
So at any rate, that's sort of the summary right now, and again, we're projecting. We're using about a 3% net interest cost, hopefully it'll be less than that. Because I think we're gonna be spending most of the grant money first. We need to spend the SWIFT money, the $5 million of SWIFT money has to be spent by the end of the year. And on the EDA grant, is that a similar time frame, or they?
Similar, if I remember correctly.
They may be more
That's right.
proportionate on that one as far as how that draws down, so, but we do have to close with Indiana Bond Bank on the 40.7 million. And then they will invest that and we'll earn arbitrage on those funds while they're, until we get to that spend down.
If you look at the project budget, some of you should have in front of you, a lot of those funds and the reason they're allocated in that way are in order to use those grant funds first. To use them by not only saves somewhat on interest, but also allows us to stay in compliance with the funding agencies. I think we had 4 or 5 maybe changes or we kept getting it kept allowing us to hold off a little bit, extend a little bit, and they're done. We'll get no more extensions on the grants. It does have to be in contract by, I believe, June 19th.
I do want to give the folks at Rural Development a big plug because they have been absolutely accommodating to us with all these, sort of major changes. And I'll echo Eric's observations that we've seen that same scenario in a number of wastewater projects, water projects. It's just incredible. The inflation costs due to, inflation, supply chain issues, COVID, all the above. But it is what it is, and we're at a point where we've got to pull the trigger or risk losing some of those favorable funding without any change in what we need to do. But that's sort of a summary of where we are with the project costs. And again, then at the end of construction, Rural Development will pay off the Indiana Bond Bank. This will be our band 2. We have a band 1 that paid for the preliminary design, engineering, and so forth. But band 2 will be construction, and then after construction, the USDA will take it out with a 40-year loan, and we've got those rates locked in, the 1.125% on over 21,245,000 and 2.125% on the other 19,445,000. So I'm going to go ahead and jump to the Indiana Code sets forth the rate making formula for municipal utilities. This for municipal sewage works, it's IC 36923. Don't be so impressed that I know all these code references. There's about 2 of them that I use all the time. That's one of them. Phil knows them all, though. But at any rate, it establishes the statutory revenue requirements for a municipal utility. And it's interesting. Oh, I've got electric in here, but it actually mirrors the public utility statute. But for wastewater utilities and water and electric and gas, there's a shall be sufficient language in the Indiana Code to provide for the cash operation and maintenance expenses, debt service on bonds and other indebtedness, debt reserves and working capital, and then depreciation and or an allowance for replacements and improvements. And so those are the statutory mandatory revenue requirements. And that's really where we're drawing the line with the wastewater rates. Several years ago, we stopped making payments in lieu of taxes out of the sewage works. And we're not including any kind of rate of return on plant in the sewer rates. So we really have the rates down to really a bare bones minimum that we need to, number one, satisfy our bondholders. And number two, to cover the reasonable and necessary costs of operation and have some allowance for capital projects going forward. I don't think we're gonna get to fully fund our depreciation, which, for years, a lot of utilities couldn't do it with the rates that they had in place, but, we'll have about 400,000 a year that we can spend on recapitalization of existing assets and slip lining and doing other I&I reduction projects and so forth, but, hopefully at the treatment plant, we'll be good for several years, because there's probably a warranty on most of the equipment, I would imagine. But, so that's sort of the approach to the rates. These are the rates that are being proposed. Right now, our monthly treatment charge is $6.30 per 100 cubic feet, plus a $31.74 base charge. What we're proposing is to do a two-step increase that would begin to phase in hopefully in June or as soon after as can be reasonable. They have to reprogram the computer and do a number of things, but that's sort of our target, to start billing the new rates in June. Probably wouldn't collect the money till July, but for the June billing period. And they would go up to, the volume charge would first go to $7.40 and then up to $8.15 per 100 cubic feet. Whereas the base charge would go from $31.74 per month to $37.29 per month, and then up to $41 per month. So when we get to the end, and we would have those rates phase in 2025.
Is it necessary to do it that quick?
Well, we are gonna have potentially $2 million. I'm gonna show you the cash flow projections here next, and there's probably room for a month or two, but the sooner we can get to that point, the better. But that's a good question, Terry. We're suggesting to do it in, so we get a full year under our belt in 2025 before the project's completed. We'll have to have it all in place by 2026. And the interesting thing, just paying interest on the Indiana Bond Bank construction loan isn't that much different than what our full debt service requirement is going to be. In fact, our full debt service requirement actually goes down a little bit than what a full year of interest on the Indiana Bond Bank loan will be. So
we'll go from about 3.6 to probably blended 1.1s and 2.1s in there.
Yeah.
So it, even though it's less
it'll
money.
probably be about
it's more
1.5
interest.
at when it blends, it's probably 1.5%. So and then and plus we get a 40-year term, which really helped bring the rates down. If we had to pay this over 20 years, it would be, a much bigger jump.
Can you speak to the rate changes we made in the last couple of years and what,
Yeah.
and where that money is in this project or in the, how is that being utilized to?
We're going to use it to pay off one of the bonds early. And then we're also going to, instead of financing the capitalized interest, we're going to pay that on a pay-go basis. We're going to pay that instead of borrow the money. The rates will be sufficient to cover that. And we'll still have a decent level of working capital in the operating fund, because once we start incurring the full debt even on the IBB Band 2, as we get toward the end of 25, there won't be that much interest earnings coming in on what they're going to manage for us. They're going to invest that money for us. But So we'll start hitting that full interest on the roughly 40,700,000. And that's why, you know, it would be good to put in that phase two just as quickly as possible, but without doing it all in one step.
So what is the amount that you pulled from the existing
Yeah.
wastewater surplus on your sources?
Let me jump to this slide here. The, actually. Go. About in total, about $2.4 million.
That's what was accumulated.
We'll
Half the
have,
rate increases.
I mean, we're planning on still having some positive cash flow to be able to do that without draining all our cash. We probably got about 2.4 million right now. But we don't want to drain that all down to zero. I'm projecting we'll have probably a little over $1 million left in the operating funds after construction is completed. Because we'll still be generating
So what we generate between now and the end of construction will equal about 3 million, and we got about 2 million in interest. Is that how I'm reading them?
I'm sorry.
Somewhere I see 2 million in interest in here.
Yes, that on the rural development. They count capitalized interest in their project costs, but they're also counting on us paying for that capitalized interest. That's why I show it as an in and an out on this. But part of that 2 million will recoup. I think our debt service when we finally close with RD is about $1.4 million per year. Let me jump to that schedule. Let me show. Okay. Here's where we are right now. We're generating about 2.5 million per year. I'm assuming that we'll get about 6 months of cash collections on the phase one rates in 2024. And we'll get a full year at the phase one rate in 2025. And if we put the phase two in January, it would be about another 300,000 that we would generate. In terms of we've escalated the existing operating cost by about 3% per year, just inflationary adjustments, but we've also added about $130,000 for polymers and for one additional staff person, which I understand is probably needed without even doing the project. Adding that person is an important move, and certainly after the project's completed, they'll need that other person. But we factored that in to occur at some point during the construction period that additional employee would be added. And then the polymers, we've added that into the phase two rate increase. So the interest on the band two, 1 year's interest on the band two is actually about $45,000 more than what the total principal and interest will be after we refinance it with rural development, because of the lower interest rate we're getting from them after construction. But I think what happened years ago, and we've seen the same thing with the state revolving fund, they would obligate these funds oftentimes before construction even started, and then they would run into higher bids or higher change orders, this and that, and then they'd have to end up with the second loan before they even, finish construction. They'd have to close on a second loan. So now they've set up this program with the bond bank where the bond bank will fund the construction loan. And so by the time rural development comes in, everything's done. And that exact amount will be, right sized at that point. And there is a pretty significant contingency allowance factored in so that hopefully we can do the sludge drying bit or the belt test. Centrifuge, I'm sorry, it has to do with, drying the sludge quicker. And so the hope is that there won't be many change orders and that we can put that centrifuge in with this low interest loan money we're able to get committed from rural development. And if we're a couple $100,000 shy, that's another reason to have these rates in place, because we could shore that up and still make sure that happens at the end. Obviously, if we spend $3 million on construction contingencies, that's gonna be a different picture, but the hope is to have it sized so that there'll be money left over that to put that centrifuge in right away, and then that'll streamline the sludge drying process at the plant. And we've got it covered in with the low interest loan rather than having to figure out how to borrow the money later and do that project. So when we look at 2025, if we had to shell out the full years of interest during construction, we'd have a debt coverage ratio at the end of about 128%. And then when we make the switch to rural development, I've got another years of inflation factored into that. We still end up with a coverage ratio of 128%, which is about $390,000. And that was a similar target, I think, that we shot for with the original rates. That still not fully funding our depreciation. Oftentimes when you look at your monthly or quarterly financial report, it looks like there's a loss because we're depreciating a big plant. That number will probably get a lot bigger when we have another $40 million of plant to depreciate. But what we want to make sure is that we've got enough at the end of, after covering, because for the first 5 years, we'll have to fund up a debt service reserve fund as well. So that's another thing that really that cash on hand will help us weather through, is the first 5 years of funding, shoring up that debt service reserve account. Because they'll give us a longer period of time to accumulate that money, but having it fully funded means that, once it's fully funded, then you can use all that for ongoing replacements and improvements, I&I projects, slip lining lines, and still having some funds to put towards that infiltration and inflow reduction. And on that particular point, I see a lot of communities that have 2 or 3 times the amount of I&I that you're experiencing. It's not a shocking number. 60% of your flow. It sounds dramatic. If it was the water utility, it would be crazy. If it was the gas utility, we'd be on fire. But it's not an uncommon thing with wastewater to have I&I, and what is often determined after going through all the studies they do on where the key spots are and the collection system to fix and so on. It's oftentimes decided that it's cheaper to build the capacity to treat the I&I than it is to, tear up all the roads downtown, to replace. Unfortunately, probably a lot of those leaky sewers are in your older parts of town and downtown areas. It just gets to be, and if you're only going to hit a 15% reduction in the long run anyway, it's a lot of commotion to go at that 100%, but to do it.
Some of those are under state highways that.
Yeah. Yeah, well, when they do something, then they make you move them. So anyhow, we end up at a coverage ratio of about 128%. I think for SRF, the minimum coverage ratio is 125. Rural development, I believe, is about 120 for a project like this. So we're a little bit above that. We've got a little bit of cushion there, but not very much. And 400,000 in the big picture is not too much money to have for ongoing replacements and improvements. But we should have about $1 million left in the operating fund by the time we get to the end of construction. What does this mean? And I'm jumping through to the final rate here. Right now, your lower volume, I think the mayor confirmed that over half of the residential customers use 2,800 gallons or less.
Yeah, the median point's right around 2,800 gallons, which means half the people are less than that and half over. That's based upon existing clients. I think 73% from what we ran with Tom here, numbers he gave me were under 4,000 gallons. So you're looking at most people. I mean, I'm at 2,200, as a family. So for me, that end rate's probably going to be about 65 for me.
Yeah.
It's going to be somewhere around 68 or so to 70 for that 2,800 gallon user. Not too many people use. It's like a 27% that we're using for 4,000 gallons.
4,000 gallons is sort of the benchmark that a lot of the funding agencies look at when they compare city to city for different grant programs and so forth. So,
RD and community development block grants all could look at that. Out of 4,000 gallons where they look at it. And when it gets above that 65, that's when you become eligible for more of their funds, I guess.
and even that has been tough to do because of the demand. They're seeing so many rates over $100 a month.
So the chart that we have here that shows comparable, that's based on 4,000 gallons. Okay, hold on.
So what's in our package, or the exhibit A schedule, each one, that rate is different than what's on the schedule here. At least what I see. 7692 versus 75.
4,000 gallons.
Right.
Check that.
Oops.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, I think this chart was done.
Yeah, it is about $2 off.
This one was an old chart that, I apologize for that. That's why I didn't have that in the slideshow.
There's about $2 on 40.
But we've had a number of variations on this exhibit. The final number is 8458 for 4,000 gallons. I'll get that fixed and sent out to you, Mayor. And
You mentioned in gallons there, that you're basing
Yeah.
that off the gallons of water used per home.
yeah,
Compared to what's going out. Has there been anything done? I know we was here a year or so ago for a water increase of helping the commercial users, the industrial users, the homeowners to help reduce the amount of water they use to do efficient fixtures, do less watering of lawns.
well, the fact that your average is already quite a bit less than the state average, I don't know if that's been, I don't know that the city has a specific program.
No, I have spoken to a couple of superintendents and said, as we go through this process, client education can be very important. Being able to show people how to conserve.
It may not have been cost effective before.
There has to be an education to this thing. I mean, I take 3-minute showers, those kind of things. What most people refer to as military showers, versus my daughters that used to take 20-minute showers.
Maybe the shower's better.
Yeah.
That soap up. Get wet,
get out.
1 minute.
So. You buy shower heads with timers on them, they're.
I mean, that's a big part and could this be reduced by helping those people understand, especially commercial use. I mean, everybody thinks water's free. By 2040, water is gonna be the next oil, so,
You're right.
you know, and if we can. I'm sure there's a lot of old toilets that are 3-4 gallons that are flushing every.
We've had that
times.
internal discussion, just that part of this is that the rates go up. Can you hedge that through conservation? And keep an eye on it.
Well, if we
Look at that.
If we have a significant change in the water usage, though, won't that affect all of our numbers and our ability to pay for these things? Because if people are substantially using less water than we currently budgeted for, then
Hopefully we would offset it with growth. But
I mean, anytime you.
yeah, you're exactly right. though.
Sustainability, it's a double-edged sword.
To that point, they're very, it will be the heavy users that are going to be concerned. I think in your numbers, we did figure in some new customer growth too.
Yeah, there,
130, I think, residences.
actually, for closing with rural development, we have to use what's here now, so if we did a longer projection, we would probably do that, but to do the closing, we have to base it on what's here right now. So we don't have growth factored in customer base, but hopefully the growth will exceed potential reductions, but yeah, the safety, or the public outreach is a good idea to pursue.
So.
oh, we do that. It's a- yeah.
So that, I believe, concludes my prepared
Any more
comments.
questions with
I'd be glad.
us here?
I like it. If I see that right, my rates are gonna go up $30 in the next 2 years. Right? So from 31.74 to 62.7.
Well, no, the current rate, I just broke it down between the base charge and the usage charge.
I think it's the fourth line and the
It's,
fifth line.
it's really,
48.
this is the total current rate right here. I apologize. Yeah.
So that $30 wasn't important to the question.
Yeah, it's a
So my question really is, that's a pretty big jump regardless. What are we doing to not have to have this happen again in 2 years, 3 years? Because that's what's happened when we did the water. We came back like every 2 years and we're raising the rates. Or is there some way that this isn't going to happen again, or?
Well, if I had a crystal ball for, I'd be, assuming that things stay on track the way we think they're gonna stay on track, these rates should last, at least 4 or 5 years, but I wouldn't see any major stair steps. You're at a big stair step right now, replacing your entire treatment plant. And other communities are going through that same process as they get their new permitting requirements. And so you're gonna see this type of thing happening in other communities as well. Each community, the rate comparisons are good, but it boils down to every community has its own unique set of facts and circumstances that they've got to deal with, and that's ultimately what they need to base their decisions on. But everybody is going to be going through these kinds of things when their NPDES permit comes up.
Having a good maintenance plan together and being able to take care of issues, and there's some of that is built in there to address I&I and to address maintenance. Maintenance is where this type of plants where you're going to get your most efficiency out of our expenditure. It's like changing the oil in your car, so to speak. It's going to last longer, but we can't say, I don't think there's anything we can purchase and say 5 years from now, we're not going to have to do something with it again. So I would hope not. To most of these plants and experiences you do get that 20-year or better out of those, depending on your growth in the area. We
Yeah.
got now how much out of this one, some of these, so we go back to 1957 on some of these components that are in this plan. So the last increase was to build up revenue that we needed in order to begin this one. Right, and that did occur, so.
And 3 years ago would have been great timing.
Yes, I,
But,
I don't,
That was the point.
yeah, it's, we're all sitting here, whatever decision we're made, we're all living with the same increase that we're asking others to do too.
I only ask that because I know there's a lot of very low income families, and that's what I'm concerned with. I'm not concerned with me. Yeah, low income, fixed income, taxes, get tax bill, just went through the roof for most people this year and last year.
But I think it's only trending upward, so if we don't do something now, it's gonna continue to just. It's unfortunate, but I think it's gonna continue to get worse.
Have you done any kind of even unofficial calculation on what current rates are now? So say we put this off a year. The cost, say 50 million, but the rate that we're financing $40 million of this project on our current rates, 3%, 4%, whatever they would be. How big of an impact is it with the risk of waiting and having to do this even at the same overall cost, but at a current interest rate? How would that affect the rates?
oh, just repricing this at 4.5, well, to get a 40-year loan, it'd probably be the current, we just had a bond sale in Bloomington last week. It was a 20-year open market bond with a AA rating. And it went for a little over 4%. So you're looking at over doubling your interest costs, plus paying the principal off in twice as quick a time. It would be,
Losing $8 million in grants.
it'd be over $100 a month easily.
We can't afford to lose the 1.5% in the two, whatever.
Yeah.
Can't afford to lose.
And we have to have the rates approved. And even though we're stepping them in, they're not gonna close our deal without that final rate being pre-approved.
I think probably too, we look at, Eric, you probably addressed the 14 million in concrete.
Yeah.
Where that would have been 2 years ago. Would have been more than what our grants are, the difference, so.
Yeah, they changed how they spell steel too.
Yeah. Yeah. And, we have other. There will be other limits after the June 19th amount that will increase new federal regulations on purchasing and construction that'll require that construction cost to go up substantially. We know that.
So I want to thank all of these 3 different groups too for rallying for these special meetings and so forth. They're so important to this whole process, and you really do, provide an important cog in this wheel of, local government finance, and certainly appreciate what you all do, and the questions tonight were terrific. I mean, we've got a very engaged group across the board.
You had mentioned an added person. So is their wages gonna be financed for 30 years or?
Now that's factored into the operating budget. Yeah, we can't finance operating costs, unfortunately. That's probably a good thing that we can't.
Yeah. And then you mentioned this, the drying centrifuge. Is that something that's gonna be gotten? Or is
That's
that
something,
hopes?
that's
that we may
something,
need?
there's a sufficient amount in our contingency allowance to cover that. Instead of a 5% allowance, they let us maintain a 10% allowance. So even if we spend some of the contingency money, we think that we'll have enough to draw upon from our operating funds if needed.
So why not just add that to that? I mean,
Well,
That's what it is.
there's a reason, I think, why it was kept separately, and that had to do with rural development. You know, just what's in their plan, but they all know that we have that higher amount of contingency allowance with that in mind to do the centrifuge. And,
And if we don't have the centrifuge, then we're just stuck with the drying beds.
Right.
Yeah.
So we're just hoping that we have enough.
well, we think we've got, you know, more than half of it covered, and, we'll find a way to make it work.
There's, that's what the contingency is there for, so we don't have the change orders killing us. We don't have to come back and say 2 years from now, we're gonna need another rate increase. So, we need to replace this and that.
We do have some additional dewatering besides the drying beds in the base project that we've already did. But it's a pretty labor intensive system. It would give you some ability. The issues with the drying beds, obviously, are take up a lot of space, very weather dependent, and you're very limited on when you can get rid of it. And that last part's really what can be the most difficult, because if you can't get into the fields to get rid of it, you got to have someplace to store it, and you've got a short weather window, and just the size of this plant's getting to the point that it's not really feasible to just 100% rely on the beds. So we've got a separate systems in the base project that is a bagging system that goes in a large roll-off container that would allow you to continue to landfill that as well as do the land applications. We've got some more flexibility built into that. It's still really not ideal for a plant of this size. So if we did the centrifuge, then that gives you much more flexibility. It is going to last you out 40 years, a lot better than the other. So there is something built in to improve over what you got in what's already been bid. But if we're able to do the centrifuge and we don't do this bagging system, just do the centrifuge, and it'll be a lot better for operations.
You said that the centrifuge is more efficient, so essentially maybe that one person may not be needed. But for efficiencies.
You'll probably still need that person because it does require quite a bit of work.
Did you already say you're short now?
We are short.
Okay.
That was the difference between this chart and the chart that's in the final document here was we relooked at the operating budget and came up with those two changes. That was that extra $2.
Yeah, one thing I'll say with our superintendents that we have now, we're out there now. We look at budgets, what's budgeted, staffing levels. If they're one or two below, they can operate, they have been, and that's, we've got a couple here now that are at that level. Same thing in this office. We have 4 openings in this office that we're not going to be filling. We'll look at a part-time person to fill one of those. Just because right now we have 3 people out of the office, and it's difficult to even answer the front door sometimes with different situations. So we'll probably move some of that up. But every department has that type of situation. So we talk about budgeting an extra person. That doesn't mean the person is always there or exists. Sometimes trying to find that other person that you need. Obviously, the concentration has been from a safety standpoint, those positions are definitely such as police and fire, those type of things. So fire department here is fully staffed first time in several years.
Yeah, and that was only part of that O&M adjustment. The other part was the polymers for that were determined needed to be included.
Yeah, the disposal of those solids are going to be more and more difficult to maintain. You can't just go and throw it someplace field like they used to in the past. And that's another problem advantage of centrifuge. It will get the ability to manage that process. Because each year it gets tougher. To your point, Eric, I think that what's going to be required environmentally 5 years from now throughout more than what we're seeing today. And having a centrifuge is going to really help us sufficiently meet the new standards because they're going to go.
Any other questions for me? Not, I'll turn it back to Phil probably.
Yeah, the next item on the agenda that we have would be for the Board of Public Works to make a tentative award of the collection portion of the project, which is was rebid, it's Division B. And that bid was, a little bit was Cooper Rail Servicing.
Yeah.
For $3,591,533.
Division B, collection system. Want to talk about what Division B consists of? It's actually those items that are outside of the plant, but
Yes, yeah. We are basically increasing the capacity of the sewers to get flow to the plant. Kind of from the south side of town where we've currently got some surcharging of the sewers. Down on First Avenue that, there's some, valves in the homes that keeps it from backing up. Into the basements and whatnot, so we wanted to address some of that issue to increase the capacity of that line to get to the plant. As part of this project, so that's the majority of what.
so as water flows, it all seems to stop at First Street in that area. And that's been causing a lot of problems there, but also just the normal flow. And now that we're able to take more flow, we have to have pipes large enough to be able to transport that flow to there. That includes rebuilding of there's street rebuilding and things in there, and we have worked with street department and along with the wastewater, and we'll be getting the other utilities involved on how we could have a smooth street when we're done at a lower cost. I think we've got some answers to that.
When will that take place?
When would that take place?
If we're gonna get grant?
No, in part of the contract, we do have non-construction times. There are times that Cherry Street intersection has to be open. That would be during festival times, and so they won't be out there digging while the floats are going down First Street. There are areas of that street has to be maintained open, and it's part of the construction schedule.
Is this project First Street or First Avenue?
First Street.
First Street.
I've heard
Yeah.
both,
Yeah, with First Street.
and I got a house between them, so I want.
First and Jack.
There may be a time where Cherry Street's down for a little bit because there's so many utilities in that intersection. We have electric, we have gas here, we have water, they're gonna be impacted too at that intersection.
That will impact First Avenue and it'll, I mean, as far as it'll allow that.
It'll relieve.
It'll relieve that, what I'm getting at. That's what backs up. Okay.
Washington.
First Avenue, Washington, Brett's, all that.
And this
Right.
was one bid that didn't take our breath away because it was at about what was projected.
Yeah, I think we were at 3.5. It was what our engineer's estimate was, so.
I believe that particular street was put in at 75 or something.
So the Board of Public Works has to agree to approve that.
Yes.
This is not us.
So,
That's what I'm asking.
right now, the Board of Public Works will consist of myself, Mr. Blessinger, Mr. Fitch, and Mr. Schmidt. So we'll need a motion to accept that bid for construction.
I'll second it.
So we have first and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries to accept the construction bid.
The next item on the agenda for the Board of Public Works and Safety would be the resolution that would make a recommendation regarding the wastewater utility rates that were presented tonight. You have a resolution in the materials provided for you. It attaches as an exhibit A, the actual rates that would be recommended based upon the rate study of OW Cronin Associates and the project that you had described to you tonight.
That will go for public hearing at a later time.
Yeah, this is just a recommendation to the council to consider these rates. Then the council will introduce an ordinance tonight later to adopt these rates. but it won't be adopted until after public hearing on May 14th.
You're not approving the rates, but
Just
you're
recommending.
you're recommending that the council consider those in the tonight's hearing and a further hearing that they'll set later here during that meeting.
The rates and the project.
Yeah, the Board of Public Works has already approved the project. That's been something that it's decided on. So now what your job is to consider the project and its costs and whether or not these rates would be sufficient to pay for those costs and continue with the other operating expenses of the utility. So the Board of Public Works, first of all, makes it.
Do we hear a motion to consider the recommendation resolution that you have before you from the Board of Public Works?
So moved.
We have a second, we have first and second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion carries. Voting members, from here, basically our front row right here, is where we're at. And we do have to, the Board of Public Works and Safety, we do have motion here of the original that you will have to sign prior to leaving.
And the rate advisory board has in their packet, the very same resolution, determining that after investigating the project and then propose the rates that they would recommend to the utility board and to the, I mean, not the utility board, but to the council, that these rates be adopted.
Do we have any motions among the members?
I would move to accept the resolution based upon Exhibit A.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We have first, we have a second. All those in favor?
Right?
Any opposed? Nay, abstain. We have one nay.
Yeah, well. There's it.
Okay, 3-1.
I'll give you this resolution. Those of you who voted in favor.
I want to thank you, all of you. I know that you all followed your heart and your mind in making your decisions. This is not an easy thing to do. Whether you voted yea or nay, it was a tough decision both ways. I understand that, but at this point, you're free to leave. We'll adjourn the meeting. You can stay, not running you out of here by any means, but the council has other business. They'll go through. You're free to stay to be a part of that. And I appreciate your efforts. And I know you've all been looking at this materials as we've emailed about the mass number of documents, and I appreciate that.
You guys.
Yeah.
Okay.
Introducing the ordinance.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second the motion.
Well, now we have council will be asked to consider introduction of the sewer works rate ordinance. I think was sent out to you in the board packet.
They're pre-numbered, right? We're gonna give you those.
Oh, that's right, you did.
I didn't have a number. Did you?
I'm sorry, was it 17?
The rate was in 2024, 07.
0 cent. So tonight, you're actually to introduce a number on rate ordinance is 2024-07. You wouldn't have, you cannot adopt it tonight. You can only adopt it after a subsequent public hearing. So what we'd be asked to do tonight is introduce this ordinance by motion and vote, and then also set a public hearing on this ordinance for May 14th, the next regular.
You need a motion to introduce.
Introduce a number.
Introduce the 2024-07.
I'll make a motion to introduce.
We have a motion introduced by this person where? We have a second.
I'll second it.
We have a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
And then to set this ordinance for public hearing at May 14 at 5:30.
We have a motion to set the public hearing date.
I'll make that motion.
Second. We have first and second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you. And May 14th. So that hearing is set for public hearing set for 5/14/24 at a regular meeting time at 5:30. Thank you to everybody. Stay tuned. Have safe travels. Next, we have considered for an ordinance, kind of the history behind the state board of accounts requires us.
We have to, actually, want to introduce and hopefully pass tonight the bond ordinance.
I'm sorry.
So you have an amended bond ordinance. As you recall, we adopted a bond ordinance to fund the project back in 2020. But because of the cost overruns, we have to amend the bond ordinance. That original bond ordinance provided for bonds not to exceed $25 million. Because of cost overruns. This bond ordinance would authorize bonds not to exceed $50 million. However, as you saw in Buzz's report, the anticipated bond issue will be $40,722,000. But we always build a little leeway in there in case something goes wrong. But this ordinance would authorize issuing bonds not to exceed $50 million to be paid with interest rates not to exceed 5%. And as you heard, about half of that funding will be at 1.125%, and the other half will be at about 2.125%. Bonds are going to be paid over 40 years with annual interest and principal payments, or actually semi-annual interest payments and annual principal payments, and they can be paid early. And we could also issue bonds on a parity with it. We need additional funding at a later time, so long as we meet coverage tests with our revenues. But tonight, we ask that you consider introducing this ordinance and suspending rules and adopting on the same night as introduced.
Make a motion to accept.
And this is 08, is it 08?
2024-08.
So we have a motion,
I'll second.
a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Make a motion to suspend rules, adopt the same night as introduced.
I'll second it.
We have first and second. And all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Motion carries.
Adoption. Passage.
Make a motion to pass.
Make a motion to adopt.
But
Tim,
we have
Tim did.
we have a motion by Mr. Ware to. Any second?
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you again. Okay, now, this one.
Aye.
Bolte.
Aye.
McFerrin.
Aye.
Ware. Down. Aye. 5 ayes, no nays.
was confusing me. Next week, what it's being to something.
We do have a consideration of ordinance for promotional expenses. That ordinance, came from, actually was derived from, State Board of Accounts, conversations, I guess, with their town clerk regarding that, our existing line item for promotional expenses was too big. I don't know if we want to have any questions.
The State Board of Accounts takes the position that you can spend money for promotional things and for the betterment of the community, but you have to have an ordinance that authorizes that. And looking through our ordinances, we never specifically had an ordinance that authorized.
We had line items on the
budget.
budget.
So it was always budgeted, but never explained what it was. So reality is in this ordinance. So in order to enact that ordinance, we would.
We'll go through the same process if you choose to introduce it tonight and then suspend rules.
Motion introduced.
Second.
What number is this?
2024-09.
Karen Ware? Yes, I'll make a motion to suspend the rules, adopt the same
We
night.
have to vote.
Vote on the introduction. Yeah.
It's out of your.
So we do have a second on that. All those in favor?
Aye.
Now.
Now you can, now you
Yeah.
can.
There you go.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye. Motion to adopt.
Steve.
I'll second.
We have a second by Pam Bolte. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? No. Okay, Kissel. Aye. Bolte.
Aye.
McFerrin.
Aye.
Ware.
Aye.
Bounce. 5 ayes, no nays. We're going to, we do not have Mr. Ritz here, is that correct, Paul?
It is correct.
Okay. So we'll skip that one tonight, but we'll go back. We do have reports from Superintendent John Rudepoler. John, just won't take too long tonight.
I don't think as long as it's wastewater. Reports,
Or wait.
yes, there's gas department, we had a couple services. And we did have a leak in Southridge Heights after tracked it down. Dug it up, found out there's a sewer line right underneath it. Looked like it got caught with a backhoe or something, kinked the pipe, might have been 20 years ago, but finally started leaking. So we did get that fixed. It wasn't reported when it was hit. And the crews did install 105 smart points. We're pretty well done with our smart points. Boonville just picked up $6,700 worth today. So we got them shipped out. Changed out 71 meters. And we did use a vac machine to verify some gas sizes over in Jasper. We ended up finding a hidden valve under the pavement. So, Jasper is going to repave that road. So we had to get that repaired right away. We got the valve replaced. Then we got a sample of an invoice last year in January. We had to order some 6-inch line stoppers. They would not give us a price when we ordered them. They said it'd be a year, but we had them for the railroad project on 231, which, by the way, the highway will be closed the week from Saturday. I think you're aware of that. For the weekend, and then down to 1 lane, I think, till July. So gonna be a little busy there. But as you can see, the price I paid in 2019 for the valve, for the line stopper. We had to buy a couple in 2022. And we ordered the 4, and like I said, they wouldn't give us a price, a year to get them. So when we got the invoice, as you can see, there's no return on it. You can see what the price is. So it went up that much. We're the only manufactured that item. We can only get it from Grosvenor. So I need probably an official approval to purchase them, even though we're already purchased. But since it went over the $10,000 mark, I think I just need official approval.
I'll make a motion to approve the invoice.
I'll say.
All those in favor? Aye. Thank you, John.
So that's just quite an increase.
Oh, yeah.
Electric side, we set some temporary up at the airport for the Eclipse, and then we tore down. We had to set up a temporary transformer and then run some outlet boxes out of that, but worked out real good. We installed 2 services. And the County Road 900, we took down the old copper wires. We run some new
primary wire, the new neutral, the aluminum. 2,300 feet each run, so we got that done. And there was a pole at Cherry and First Street, it's 50-foot pole on the main line. Ended up being rotten at the bottom, so the guys had to spend a couple days getting that replaced. And 2 of our crew are doing CDL training. And brings the truck they want to use. His gas department's 1996 2-ton pickup truck or dump truck. It's a manual. I even trained on that when I did my CDL 28 years ago. And I think about everybody used that truck. So they got it in there, gonna wash it. Tires were real rusty, the rims were rusty. The cab was faded out. You can see what the bed looked like. So the guys took it had a couple rainy days coming. So they ended up repainting the rims, sanding them down, repainting them. Took the oxidation off the cab, re-waxed it. And they did sand down the bed and painted the bed black, so you can see what it looks like now. You know, we did put a rebuild transmission in it. We spent about $200 on all the wax and some paint. It's really not feasible. We figured to trade it in and get a new truck because back in the days, the city just only had backhoes. And when you had to dig the holes out, they were a lot bigger, and Jerry can attest. Now we got mini excavators, we got hydrovac machines. We don't have to dig near bigger holes. So mainly use just our 1-ton pickup. So this pickup or the dump truck just gets used sparingly. So we figured it'd be worth the money to invest a little money in it. Spruce it up a little bit instead of trying to purchase a new one.
I say that thing should be in the parade.
Yeah, you too, I agree.
It's like I say, it's a 96, so.
I can't believe these guys knocked the transmission out of it.
A lot of gear grinding. CDL, I think a lot of people in the city use that truck to do the CDL driving. And then
Good job on that.
Yeah, good job on it, thanks.
yeah, they did a real good job on it. So hopefully it'll last several more years.
Yeah.
Right now, the crews are working at 19th and North Van Buren Street. We got a couple poles that are in bad shape on the corner. So we're gonna plant some temporary poles, run some temporary lines so we can de-energize that corner pole, take the lines down, change the pole out, put them lines back. So it's gonna take several days. So we've been working on that. We're right out of Pam's house.
Oh, down here, yeah.
You know, we're good at the outage.
Hopefully it won't last a couple days.
Yeah, that's fun, that's fun.
Any questions? On the reports?
Good job. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
We have, Mr. Jerry Austin. Hello, Jerry.
Good afternoon. You guys get my 40 slide presentation?
Yeah.
Keep in the evening, Jerry.
Past all of our bedtime. Nope, we're running.
Jerry.
I said all of our bedtimes, not just your guys' bedtimes. Run through this real fast. We did finish our spring hydrant flushing and valve exercising. We did with that. We found 3 hydrants with issues. One of them was out of order when we got on it. The other 2 tried to order parts for. They were early 80s, late 70s American Darling hydrants. I can't get parts for them, so pulled them out of the ground, and we actually just installed one yesterday, one today, and then we've got one for tomorrow. We'll have all those replaced. We did have another failed copper service line at North of the Estates. We went in and we were able to pull a poly line all the way into the road across the meter pit, so worked out in our favor there. And then we've got a transite water main that runs pretty much all the way down West Sunset Drive from Main Street to roughly Cody Bird's house. I don't know if you guys know where he lives. It's concrete, no way to trace it. We've came up short a couple times on where we thought it was. So we had a local contractor come in to do some bore work. So we took some time this past week to go out there with a hydro excavator. Made very small impact on people's yards to locate that main all the way down through there and set some water main markers along the way, so we know where it's at from here on out. Other than that, we've been doing our large diameter water meter installations. They're quite a bit more difficult than a small residential meter, so some of our distribution guys will be going out with our meter tech and taking care of that as needed. Other than that, our filter plant is running as it should. And our metering system, other than installing those large diameter water meters. Corinthians Mobile Home Park, they've always been on a one master meter for that whole trailer court there. I'm sure most of you were around whenever they did the Second Avenue trailer court. I think Brett Street was the same way. They took them off the master meters, and the trailer court hired a licensed plumber to come in. They do all the work. All we do is provide them with a meter. They provide everything else for that project. So those 28 mobile homes in that park are now on individual meters, all being billed to the customer versus to the landowner. Other than that, that's all I've got.
Thank you, Jerry.
So does that mean that'd be higher revenue in that same district 1 month prior? You're making more money now than we did.
No, pretty much what that does is in that instance, the property owner owns the lot, the renter owns the trailer, so if they've got a leaky toilet, they just, they can let it leak for months and the landowner's gonna pay for it, where now the actual homeowner is responsible for their water usage.
What one was that? Which one?
Behind Wendy's,
That's what I thought. Down on the.
12th Street, yep,
Well,
that's both of Jackson.
at least we call Carnage.
Right here.
Yeah, never heard it called that before.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. Paul Lake's gonna come up. We have, Gary Ritz is not here, but, he does have his, we got his financials back and be able to submit his tax abatement compliance form.
This is a housekeeping item that came before you last year and the year before that on the Wagon Works. You've seen it before with some of the other tax payments. And what it does is it spells out what the agreements and what the promises were, the statement of benefits that was approved by the council back in February of 2019 in order in return for you granting a 10-year 100% tax abatement to the project on real property. This year, we've got the certified assessed values and the compliance with statement of benefits CF1 form has been submitted. The petitioner, Gary Ritz, just got those in the last 48 hours and sent them to us. And that's just because that's as soon as he could get them from the county assessor. The project is in compliance with the original statement of benefits. Really, there hadn't been much deviation, and you wouldn't expect that because the investment was up front. The only thing that has changed slightly is the anticipated wage rates has gone up for the two positions that are down there. And what's being asked of the common council tonight is that you either agree or disagree that the project is in compliance with its approved statement of benefits.
Motion or what can?
So we need a motion to be able to say that they are in compliance based on the CF1.
Just a motion.
I'll make that motion. I'll second it.
Those in favor?
Thank you very much. That is it. Tom, I will get with you in the morning.
Yeah, thanks.
Should have went first.
Yeah. Now we have transit director,
Wake her up.
April. Lessinger,
It's gonna be May for
she does. April has worked with, our clerk, been able to put together a financing package to be able to purchase a new vehicle and.
Actually, asking,
Approval to accept the.
the council to allow me to apply for the grant for the transit. Every year I have to have approval for
And the
that.
match will be paid for by an insurance claim. Basically.
50% would be the city amount. That's approximately 176, 167. That's what I came out with. The total amount is 352,335. So went up a little bit from last year.
This is a 5311.
Yes, yes.
That's the first one.
So I'm just asking if it's okay, have approval to apply for the grant for the transit system.
So moved.
I agree.
You guys okay with that? After 30 some years,
Favor?
everybody's sleeping.
And do you need, whose signatures do you need in order to apply?
I don't need any signatures yet. Everything has to be signed electronically this year,
Okay.
so I will have a lot of documents coming to you in the next week because I have to have this in. But that's the reason why I couldn't wait till the next meeting, because I'd only had 3 days and I know how busy y'all are. And then I wanted to ask for, to be able to apply for a new transit van. I sent you guys this and I highlighted the one that I would like to get, and it's exactly like what we have, but the one that we have right now is a 2008. It has 100,000 miles on it, and it started to use a lot of oil. And, you know, that's a problem if you can't get as many miles on the vehicles when you're in the city like that, seems like. So, the total amount is 142,000 for the vehicle, or no, 139,575 for that vehicle. 80% would be paid by federal dollars. Their share would be 111,660. And then our share would be 27,915. But we do have a small amount of money left over from a vehicle that was, we had some insurance money left over. It's $3,451. That's what we had left over from that vehicle that was wrecked. Insurance money, so.
The net batch is gonna be about 24,000.
Yeah.
We have that from what?
I guess tonight's not a good night to ask.
It sounds like it's about money.
It's a really small amount of money compared to what
The money's there, but is the budget, do you have budget there for that?
for,
For the 24?
Do we have to?
We approved
We're not-
budget this last year. Is that in your budget?
Oh. it will be for 2025. Yeah, and
So
if I wait, see, vehicles are really hard to come by. I'm not sure when I'll get it. Do you remember when I ordered the mini bus and it took 3 or 4 years? And the bigger buses are back ordered as well. So I mean, I would need the money in 2025, but I might not get the vehicle for a couple of years, you know, so.
So just gotta be sure we put that on your budget line item.
Right. In the fall, whenever we do the budget.
So the motion being approved,
Hey, Brian,
the application.
I have a question for you. What was your logic between, maybe you don't need a 12-passenger van, but there's such a small difference in the price between the 8 and 12? Is there a reason why you would have chosen the 8-passenger? Or is it just not really needed with the 12 or what?
We have a fairly new 12. The drivers like driving the smaller one better.
Okay.
They love that 75, that little vehicle. I don't know, it's easier for them, but I mean, yeah, I mean, I could go to the next one as
Do we
well.
ever have that kind of a passenger load difference though?
Actually, that vehicle is used quite a bit. We take Beehive and it's completely full when we take them, but you know, that's the vehicle that we usually use. I guess if a couple more people moved in out there, it would be a problem, but then we have the 12-passenger as well, so. we can
So
always-
you're saying you normally use the 8?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
It's actually 10 because it has a seat that folds up so that we can put a wheelchair in and you can unhook the latch and let that other seat down. So it's actually,
No, it's 8 plus 2 wheelchair.
Yeah.
Okay, I was just curious.
yeah.
Thank
But
you.
that's why I picked that one because I wanted it to be the same as what we already have.
Will you have to apply for a grant for this
Yeah.
80%?
So our grant is due May 17th. And in order to get that vehicle, order that, or put in for that vehicle, I have to submit that with the grant. A request for that. And there's no guarantee they'll give it to us, but pretty sure they will.
Able 2025 delivery 2026.
Maybe, yeah.
So the approval for the grant that we just did, or that just did.
To apply for it, yeah.
This was for the transit van.
The grant we just approved was operating funds.
Right.
For next.
Operating grant.
Are you gonna have-
53.
You're gonna have one for the capital van, the capital.
For the
Usually you have a capital.
Yeah, yeah, I will whenever
Okay.
but I wanted to check and make sure it was okay for me to do the work. If it's not, then I won't, if you guys don't agree to it, then I'm not gonna waste my time.
Do we have a big one that's?
No, that's what we're waiting.
So what we're waiting for right
So
now.
moves again.
You all have to sleep.
Normally on these, they want to know that the grants applied for, with the knowledge of the council and those that have fiscal responsibility over it. So that's what she's asking for right now, is that you're okay with her moving forward and transfer. You're not allocating any funds, and that could be done and could or may not be done in the following year's budget.
Right,
Correct? Okay.
Right.
So the motion would be to allow you to apply.
move forward with it, yeah.
For the grant fund. I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll
We
second.
have, we have a first and second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
They're all
Carries.
quiet.
Mike.
Whenever you order these, you just order the E30, the 350, whatever, does it come in diesel or gas, or do you have a choice? Or
It'll
they-
be gas.
They make, they.
I don't
They,
think they give us
they
a
just show
choice.
it.
Yeah.
They just show up.
It's just like the one that we just got, the small van. We thought that we were getting something different. And then whenever, but we waited for 3 years, so we didn't complain when we got
Oh,
it.
yeah. no.
We ended up getting a
You
Voyager,
get
and
what
I
you
think
get.
we were supposed to get a Ford, or I don't know, but yeah,
We have anything, clerk treasurer, Tom Dipple?
Thank you.
thank
I
you.
do have one thing. I think it was Eric, Commonwealth Engineers.
Yes.
They have,
Nothing.
they have requested an amendment to the engineering agreement for our wastewater plant. Now, usually the Board of Public Works approves that. And we have a meeting next Monday, but rather than drag Eric back down that next Monday unless he wants to go.
So,
Next Thursday.
yeah, the two items that necessitate, the two big items that necessitate the amendment. One of those is the final design drawings, and when you saw the 50-foot borings that were conducted there with the tank. There was extra work that was administered as part of that. And also, in order to incorporate bidders and meet the demands of bidders, but also supply chain right now. The project has gone from an 18 to 24-month budget, time span. And so those are the big changes in it. All other items are consistent with what was previously negotiated within the past with the old contract, but there will be an extra 6 months in there. Any costs with this were figured in, and they're in the line items for what you saw earlier from us. So they're already in that number. We originally
on that?
Yeah.
Dollar amount on that.
Yeah, I'll read, we kind of broke up under three categories. We had 165,570 for additional final design, which was what the mayor was talking about, both the geotechnical work and then also some value engineering stuff we did during the bidding. We made some pretty significant changes at the kind of working with the bidders at the time when they got their hands on the project and they could see some things, some places we could make some adjustments. One notable thing was raising the tank up. We had it partially buried. And I think we saved over $1 million in shoring by changing that elevation, raising it up, and then that kind of had a trickle effect with some
It's a
other things.
30-foot
So
tank. So
yeah,
32
yeah,
is-
it was pretty dramatic. And then we had to relocate some sewer lines in order to accommodate that change as well. And then back to your question, Tom, sorry, the construction phase service is 126,850. The inspection service is $167,580 for a total of $460,000 even.
That brings the original group amount was 3,252,000. Adjusted gross amount, 3,712,200. Originally,
And we don't do, we generally don't do our agreements based on a percentage of construction costs. Some others do. We see it in some other states. Kentucky and USDA contracts a lot of times do something like that. And I do kind of gauge that just to see where we are, and we're well below where that number would be based on the percentage construction costs using the factors that Kentucky uses on RD type
it'll be
projects.
200,000 higher, probably 400,000 or 500,000
Yeah,
higher based upon that percentage that normally you see in other areas.
That's great. I think something I could see, people would think that you would jack the price up on.
right.
on
Once we see
certain
that,
sites.
right. No, we really, we do take the effort to go through, person by person, how much manpower we think we're gonna have on things. And, we can engage based on what we've seen. Our level of effort's been on similar projects and things in the past. So, but we like everyone else, a couple of years ago, went through a pretty dramatic labor cost increase as well, so.
And are you gonna be the GC on this project or?
No, so our construction involvement, we do have an inspector that's on site every day. That's observing everything, and then our engineers are on site periodically. We review all of the pay applications, any requests for information or changes or clarifications that the contractors have. And then shop drawings, materials and things that come in, we review all of that, make sure it's consistent with what's in the specs, and then we assimilate and administer all that. There's a software program used on Procore that has all the construction information records and everything's on that. City's got the ability to access that.
We know they live in Spencer County, so
Yeah.
we know they should respond.
You might have to talk a little slower, but. Yeah. Executed myself, I think.
What are we,
Right.
Yes, can we motion to approve the amendment to the existing contract that was originally signed December 12, 2023? Got a motion, got a second? I'll second. All those in favor? All those opposed? Thank you.
There, I'm gonna leave you to originals. I noticed before I left the office this afternoon that we had not signed the E-Verify statement. This one has that signed. It's the only change.
So I did have one other question.
No.
So, when this is sent out to bid, are you anticipating more than just one bidder, or you think that it's?
No, so it has already been bid.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we just had the one. Yeah, we just had to win. And we actually had to, for the funding agencies, we had to provide justification for the recommendation of only having one. So we prepared a memo. Well, I can circulate it to you guys if you want, that has some of the due diligence work that we did through the bidding process to ensure that it was competitive and that we did appropriate outreach to try to get more bids. So.
And by the way, Reynolds is a good contact. They're experienced, they've done projects like this in the past.
Yes.
Their record, I think the big thing that Sobe is that change orders, they don't kill you with change orders.
No.
Like some.
I think too,
companies.
there have been some around that have had issues with kind of that it's kind of been ongoing, so it's,
Yeah.
I don't know, I think it's kind of a double-edged sword sometimes. The
Yeah.
cheapest one isn't always the best.
Isn't always
one,
the
so
best.
It's good that Reynolds is.
Yeah, and actually they just built a project similar to yours in Paoli. We just actually issued final completion a couple weeks ago, actually, and did a very good job. So very experienced with this particular type of plant and project. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, there's, we need one more motion.
I move to adjourn.
All those favor? All those opposed? All right. We turned,
Have you learned quick?
I preferred last.
Seconded the motion.
Yes.
I thought I heard it, yeah.
I have a question.
Sure.
So did you have